So how long ago did you come up with the idea for Mumager? So just so everyone understands, Mumager is a would you call it a product or a stream within what you do at Being at Your Best?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of the big product areas that I would now offer. And in fact, is where I spend the majority of my time. So I think there's a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. And rather selfishly, I created it for myself. So I found going back to work, funnily enough, after my second maternity leave, harder than going back after my first. And I didn't help myself. And if anyone else is a freelancer out there listening, you may identify with the fact of when someone asks you to do something, yes, yeah, absolutely, I can do that. You want me to travel for 8 weeks back to back? Sure thing. You want me to go to Istanbul, Moscow, Frankfurt? Yeah, I can do that with a 6-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old toddler at home. So I was really keen to get back. I was looking forward to getting back to work. I love what I do. And in hindsight, I took on way too much. Way too much. All of the things that I now talk about in terms of easing yourself back in and setting realistic goals, I didn't do that. So I was at a point where I felt like I was doing a pretty rubbish job at everything. I felt I wasn't being a good mum. I was traveling, I was away. When I was home, I was exhausted. I felt guilty that I'd been away, leaving the boys. And when I was at work, I just didn't feel like I was performing at my best. Now, I don't know that anyone else would have noticed, but you know when you just get that feeling of, I'm not being at my best here. So I came to a point where I thought, right, I come from a background of positive psychology, so what can I do to help myself? And with a very good friend of mine, we sat down and we looked at all the tools and tactics that we all know and we all talk about, and I began to apply them to myself. So once they started to work and I began to really feel more in control of everything, I began to think, well, is this just me? So with a bit of research, I didn't have to look too far to find out, no, it wasn't just me. There was many other women in my position coming back and really trying to struggle with that juggle. So I ran the first ever Mumager workshop, gosh, it'll be 5.5 years ago now, here in Ireland where I'm based. But then people started to say to me, but hang on, Tracy, what about the dads? Are you going to do a dadager? And then from my own background in L&D, I thought, well, if you don't have the support of the line managers, we can do a lot of talk, but unless they're willing to have conversations around flexible working options, perhaps working in different ways, then we're only ever going to get so far. So that's where the Mumager portfolio now extends to sessions for line managers, sessions for all working parents, because as we know, families come in all shapes and sizes, blended families, adoptive families, same-sex families, the list goes on. And then this specific workshop for the women who are coming back from maternity leave. And really the idea of that is helping people be at their best so that they can be great at home and they can be great at work. It shouldn't be a choose one over the other. We should, and I believe we can do both.
And you have traditionally ran these face-to-face, but you're now running them virtually as well,
yes.
Is that right?
Yes, indeed. So we have all of the products can be delivered virtually, and in fact this week I'm delivering those for one of my clients, and I really think this is the way forward, so that people can access the learning in a way that's convenient for them. Also that it can extend the reach, so that it's not location specific, and I've got people who are located in all different places across Ireland and the UK, but also to think broadly, the challenges that we face are the same regardless of where I live in the world. So sky's the limit on the virtual element.
It's so true, and it fits with the whole idea of flexible working, which was trending all over social media actually yesterday. And I've pulled a few stats off your website, Tracy. 72% of women feel conflicted, balancing their family and career. 90% of parents find balancing family and work stressful, and yet only 33% of managers are aware that they're struggling to balance work and life.
Yeah.
That's worrying, especially because a lot of managers will also be parents.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And what we find is that, there's a big mentality of, I'll just get on with it. And most of us are really good at just getting on with it. And we put the face on to say, yeah, everything's fine. Whereas inside, it's often where we feel that struggle, and we don't always feel comfortable. I know I didn't myself feel comfortable in talking about it 6 years ago when I was at that quite difficult point. So I think it's that, you know, the biggest shift I've noticed in the conversations I'm having is 5 years ago, I was kind of knocking on doors going, hey, have you thought about how you can support your women returning to work and your working parents? Whereas now, I don't really knock on very many doors. I have people coming to me going, we really want to do something in this space. How can you help us? So that's the biggest shift I've noticed, certainly in the last 2 years.
That's really encouraging, isn't it? I think that things are changing. I remember early on in my career, a manager asking me in a job interview, so now you've settled down with John, are you thinking about having kids anytime soon? And my reaction was, oh, no, of course not. And I now look back to that moment and I realised that that was part of what I chose not to have children, and because I felt like I had to choose either my career or kids. And I know that that's a shame, and I know that that's wrong. And I know there are other reasons why I made those decisions as well. But it does, you know, our work is such a huge part of our lives, and family is everything. It's just such a challenge. So how do you help people then? What's the advice that you're giving managers? How do they support their teams?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, Catherine. In fact, I'm going to link to a study that came out, I think it was just last week, and I'll send you a copy of the report so you can include it in the comments after this. But they did some research to say what practices have the biggest impact on equality at work, so men and women being able to, you know, be in senior leadership positions, etc. And unsurprisingly, perhaps we found that, you know, having gender quotas can sometimes detract because it puts the focus on the perhaps wrong area. Whereas, no surprises, I'm sure, to many of us, it will be, you know, the opportunity for flexible working, the opportunities for development, opportunities for support. So one of the biggest challenges I face, and what I find very interesting, is that I can go into an organisation that has the same company policy, yet the working practices in different parts of that business are completely different. And I'll have people in the room going, oh, you're allowed to do that? Really? I'm not allowed. I was told no. And when I explore it further with line managers, I sometimes sense that there's a hesitation to even have the discussion about flexible working because they're afraid of what it might open up. If I do this, does that set a precedent? Or will everyone want to do it? And by the way, I think this is a conversation not just for working parents, but for everyone, whether or not you have kids. We've all got stuff that's important to us in our lives, and I don't think working parents should necessarily get any preferential treatment. I think this is a conversation for everybody to have. But I still sense sometimes this reluctance with managers to have the conversation, and I wonder, and I'm curious about this, does it stem from the fact of, well, how do I have that tough conversation if that person isn't delivering? How do I set clear goals so that regardless of where this person is working, I know that they're delivering? Because, you know, people should be measured on their outputs. So yeah, that's some of the things that I would tease out with managers is to, well, why is it a no? Now, sometimes there might be a business reason. If you're a retailer, you have to have staff, you know, manning the floor, etc. But very often there's a workaround, there's a way around things, and we just need to be a bit more, I suppose, flexible in our thinking as to how we can get around that.